The episode opens within the oppressive, stone-wrought confines of a subterranean labyrinth. From the gloom emerges a monstrous, oversized rabbit. It charges forward with vicious intent. With a precise, fluid arc of his blade, he slices through the beast. The rabbit's form instantly deteriorates into a cloud of vibrant purple mist, leaving behind a glowing ruby-red crystalline gem on the uneven stone floor. More of these horned rabbits charge at him, and he cuts them down. The young man, Orn, pauses. He stands tall, his dark hair framing a face marked by sharp, analytical blue eyes. He observes his weapon, noting that his swordsmanship remains remarkably sharp despite a prolonged period away from frontline combat duties. From the corridor's depths, a pack of green-skinned goblins surges forward, each brandishing crude wooden clubs and bone weaponry. Before his palm, a complex, luminescent green magical circle manifests, its intricate geometric patterns and runic symbols rotating with ethereal energy. He silently invokes a supportive enhancement spell designed to amplify physical strength. The green energy pulses, expanding outward from the circle to envelop his entire form and coat the steel of his sword in a vibrant, crackling aura. He mentally reviews the mechanics of this enchanting magic. Orn charges into the goblin horde. His movements are a blur of enhanced speed and lethal precision, which erupts into the familiar purple particulate. He pivots smoothly, severing the arm of a second attacker before decapitating a third. As he fights, a translucent digital-style blue timer materializes in his peripheral vision, ticking down from 3 minutes. He remains acutely aware of his body's innate magic resistance, a biological safeguard that aggressively burns through the duration of self-applied support magic, limiting his enhanced state to exactly 180 seconds. The corridor seems to stretch endlessly as more goblins replace the fallen. Orn monitors the floating timer with practiced discipline, his eyes darting to the glowing blue numbers as he continuously repels the onslaught. When the timer threatens to expire, with practiced ease, refreshing his physical enhancements just as the previous aura fades. He reflects on the exhausting nature of this combat style, acknowledging that true enchanters must constantly monitor battle conditions and race against the clock. Gripping his sword with renewed vigor, he launches himself back into the fray, his blade a continuous arc of blue light that systematically reduces the remaining goblin threat into dissipating clouds of purple smoke until the corridor is entirely silent. The scene shifts abruptly from the dungeon to the warm, inviting interior of an inn. Orn stands before the desk, his posture rigid with disbelief, facing 3 individuals dressed in elaborate, pristine adventuring gear. The apparent leader, Oliver, stands tall, his golden hair perfectly styled above a regal red cape and polished armor. To his side stands a massive, broad-shouldered man in heavy silver plate mail, and a young woman with long brown hair wearing the traditional robes and wide-brimmed hat of a witch. Oliver has just delivered a crushing mandate, formally requesting that Orn permanently leave the hero's adventuring party. Orn's blue eyes widen in shock, his jaw slackening as he struggles to process the words, but he finds he has no support as the woman with the wizard hat, Anneli, smugly tells Oliver not to soften the blow and to tell him that he's weak, and the other man, Derek, is of the same mindset, smirking. Orn can't believe they both support this and agree, not seeing how 2 people he thought were friends would say this about him. He desperately reminds Oliver of their shared history, pointing out that they have been close comrades and childhood friends for 8 years. He recounts their shared struggles, highlighting their monumental achievement of conquering the 94th floor of the Southern Great Dungeon, the first S-rank party to do so in less than a year, a feat that earned them the kingdom's admiration and the revered title of the Heroes Party. Oliver's expression remains stoically indifferent. He calmly but coldly explains that nostalgia cannot compensate for Orn's current lack of utility. He asserts that Orn is simply too weak to keep up with the party's escalating power level. The towering knight steps forward, his face contorted in a sneer, vocally supporting Oliver's decision and demanding that Orn accept his inadequacy. The witch dramatically throws her hands up, feigning exasperation, and cruelly questions why Orn cannot simply admit that he is slowing their progress. Orn's face tightens with a mixture of profound hurt and rising indignation. He passionately defends his contributions, reminding them of the monumental sacrifices he made for their collective success. He details how he willingly abandoned his natural talent and preferred role as a frontline swordsman to fill the party's desperate need for a support mage. He recounts the countless hours he dedicated to studying and crafting entirely original enchanting spells, magic specifically designed to keep them alive against the terrifying adversaries found in the dungeon's deepest abysses. The blonde swordsman dismisses Orn's passionate defense without a shred of empathy, flatly stating that they have already secured a replacement enchanter who possesses far greater natural aptitude. The witch chimes in with a mocking smile, gleefully pointing out that Orn's attempts to master both swordplay and support magic have left him mediocre at both. She maliciously utilizes a colloquialism, branding him a useless jack-of-all-trades who masters nothing. The sheer callousness of their betrayal washes over Orn, physically deflating his posture. He lowers his gaze, the weight of their ingratitude settling heavily upon his shoulders. Realizing that further argument is entirely futile against their arrogant delusions, he accepts his dismissal in quiet resignation. He turns his back on his childhood friends, his black coat sweeping behind him as he exits the warm room. He grasps the hilt of his sword, silently vowing to prove their short-sightedness by achieving greatness on his own terms, utilizing the very combination of skills they so casually despised. He approaches a massive, jagged, blue crystal erupting from the dungeon floor, intending to register his current location for future excursions. Before he can complete the arcane process, the rhythmic, frantic slapping of boots against stone echoes loudly down the corridor. Orn turns to see a chaotic group of 4 adventurers sprinting toward him, their faces pale, their breaths ragged. The fleeing group begins to speak of how they had to run away as they were ambushed by a horde of monsters. But the part that catches Orn's attention is how they left their female member behind. The leader, with brown hair, says they had to, as they needed to be fast enough to run out, or they all would have died trying, attempting to justify their cowardice. Orn listens, gritting his teeth as the woman had the bad faith and luck to put her life in these cowards' hands. Still, he knows the feeling. The leader of the group says if anyone has a problem with that, they can go back and get her, and no one volunteers. Orn calls them out for being cowards. The men ask what he said, and he repeats it. They left her to die. The toughest member of the group makes the mistake of thinking he could fight Orn, claiming to be the strongest of the group, but one toss later, he does not get back up. Now Orn yells at the remaining adventurers for the girl's location, declaring he will go save her. Deep within the dungeon's lower levels, a young girl is trapped in a nightmarish scenario. She is backed against a solid stone wall, tears streaming continuously down her pale cheeks. Looming over her is a terrifying assembly of massive, muscular orcs. The creatures are hulking behemoths with gray skin. The girl Sophia is trembling violently, her eyes wide with absolute terror. She thrusts her hands forward, desperately channeling her mana to project a wide, circular green magical barrier between herself and the advancing monsters. She screams in panicked exertion, trying to maintain the shield. The impact shatters the magical barrier into 1,000 dissipating shards of green light. The concussive force throws Sophia backward, her small frame crumpling against the unforgiving stone. She pleads for anyone to save her as her eyes begin to tear. Suddenly, Orn leaps directly in front of the fallen girl, appearing in a flash of wind. Both sides rush at each other. As the lead orc swings its weapon down for a lethal strike, Orn raises his broadsword, intercepting the massive blow with a shower of orange sparks. He vocalizes his intent, mentally activating 2 simultaneous support spells, one to radically enhance his physical strength, and another to sharpen his technical dexterity and weapon handling. The potent magical aura wraps around his entire body, visibly trailing off his dark coat and infusing the length of his blade with a brilliant, crackling energy. Her mouth hangs open as she attempts to process the impossible sight before her, while simultaneously deploying high-tier, complex enchanting magic. Orn wastes no time, his blade dancing in deadly, precise arcs. Every strike finds a vital point. The air fills with the sounds of slicing flesh and dying roars as the massive monsters are systematically butchered. One by one, the towering beasts dissolve into violent bursts of thick purple mist, their solid forms evaporating into nothingness, leaving behind a scattering of glowing red gems on the stone floor. He lowers his sword and turns his head to look back at the girl huddled against the wall, as he checks on her well-being. Sophia remains seated on the cold stone, her hands clutching her chest. She is physically uninjured, but entirely overwhelmed by the sudden reversal of her fate, tears of profound relief now spilling over her eyelashes as she realizes she is safe. Orn and Sophia have successfully navigated back to the surface and are walking along a dirt path lined with lush green trees, moving away from the cavernous entrance of the labyrinth. Sophia stops walking, turning to face Orn fully. She bows her head respectfully, expressing her deepest, most sincere gratitude for his timely and heroic intervention, acknowledging that she would undoubtedly have perished without him. She introduces herself formally as Sophia Claudel. Orn remains quiet for a moment, his blue eyes studying her respectfully before he responds, introducing himself simply as Orndora. Sophia repeats his name softly, a warm, genuine smile gracing her lips as she compliments it. As they speak, Orn's gaze drifts to the fabric of her dark cape. Emblazoned upon the material in fine gold thread is a distinctive crest, a crescent moon accompanied by stars framing the silhouette of a rabbit. Orn silently recognizes the emblem. He mentally notes that she is a formal member of the Night Sky Silver Rabbits, an incredibly prominent and highly populated S-rank adventuring guild that commands immense respect throughout the kingdom. Sophia's expression turns resolute. She insists that a simple verbal thank you is entirely insufficient to repay a life debt. With a slightly flustered but determined demeanor, she proposes treating him to a proper dinner, framing it as a small token of her immense appreciation. Orn initially attempts to decline. However, Sophia's wide, earnest eyes and persistent pleading quickly wear down his resolve, and he somewhat sheepishly agrees to accompany her. They navigate the cobblestone streets until they reach a charming, rustic tavern featuring warm, glowing windows and a wooden sign swinging above the door bearing the same moon and rabbit crest found on Sophia's cape. They enter the establishment, the interior filled with the rich aroma of cooked food and the low, comfortable murmur of patrons. Before they can seat themselves, the girl runs off to a table with a woman with an imposing demeanor. She possesses striking features, most notably her long, vibrant, dark red hair. Sophia looks up, addressing the newcomer as her older sister, completely unaware that she was in the vicinity. The older sister is shocked to see her out so late and then goes on the defensive upon seeing a man with her, claiming she's too young for a boyfriend, but then pauses a little, seeing who he is. She recognizes his face, calling out his name, Orndora. Orn scratches his head as he recognizes her as Selma Claudel, a legendary figure within the kingdom. Ornn mentally recounts her accolades. She is the revered leader of the Night Sky Silver Rabbits elite S-rank party, widely considered the most powerful faction within the guild, and holds the undisputed title of the continent's absolute greatest enchanter. She is famous for her innovative combat strategies, specifically her system of dividing a party into specialized roles: attackers, defenders, and supporters, a tactical revolution that permanently altered how adventurers conquer dungeons. The biggest change was that she designed the roles for parties and optimized how to make them more effective, with the roles being attacker, defender, and enchanter. As originally Ornn was an attacker and had to switch to being an enchanter just to stay on the team, seeing her in action in the last raid ultimately had something to do with him getting fired, as Oliver wanted a full-time enchanter rather than him. He admits they do look alike, but internally has no idea why she's mad. Her first words say it all. She thinks he got tired of the S-rank dungeons and is now pursuing her 14-year-old sister. Ornn thought she was kidding, but quickly tries to explain that's not the case. He tries to clarify, but it backfires as Selma now thinks her sister wasn't good enough for him. Sophia cheerfully attempts to introduce the man who saved her life. After that's done, Selma casts a shadow over her face as she feels betrayed. She told her sister to wait for her, but Sophia went alone. She gets Sophia to promise not to do it again. Selma pulls up a chair and seats herself at their table. The two begin to talk, where she thanks him for keeping Sophia safe, and they converse casually for the first time. They also mention the raid. Sophia is confused as she thought they were friends, and Selma says no, this is the first meeting. Seeing Sophia's confusion, Selma explains further that Ornn is an S-rank too. She explains Ornn is a former hero party member, and Sophia freaks out at seeing a celebrity. Ornn says it was in the past, as he's no longer with them, and Selma is shocked as she doesn't know why they'd let him go. Ornn doesn't elaborate, simply stating it was mutual. Hearing that he's free, Selma wants to offer him a job teaching a class for which she'd pay him. She explains the program. A group of teachers, some A rank and S rank, would be taking new recruits and, in 3 months, would bring them down to the dungeon to clear the first 50 floors. Ornn immediately hesitates, knowing the proposal is nearly impossible, as even talented recruits would take at least a year to reach that point. But he understands Selma's plan. The guild wants to make larger teams to clear dungeons efficiently. Selma is impressed internally that Ornn grasps the concept immediately. She states that while the guild's veterans are capable, she specifically requires someone of his exceptional, proven caliber to act as a crucial safety net. The recruits would do the heavy lifting until they reach the boss fight, where Ornn or one of the teachers would finish the boss off. She leans forward, grabbing his hands closer to her heart, her expression softening slightly, but her words ringing with undeniable sincerity. She openly declares her immense respect for his capabilities. Ornn sits frozen, his blue eyes widening slightly as her words sink in. He stares at the incredibly powerful, universally respected woman sitting across from him. The validation is overwhelming. After suffering the profound humiliation of being called useless and a burden by the friends he sacrificed everything for, and during the raids, seeing how his magic paled in comparison to Selma's, being directly praised and sought after by the greatest enchanter in the kingdom leaves him momentarily speechless. He takes a slow, steadying breath and formally declines the offer, internally unwilling to return to being an enchanter, feeling he would regret it. Selma is disappointed. Sophia shyly tries asking him, as she'd be in the class too, and would feel better if he were present. He tells them just so she knows, he's switching back to being a swordsman. She is surprised, asking what changed his mind. Ornn explains that this is his new class, and if she wants him involved, he'd be doing so with the sword. Selma agrees, but hesitates, noting that if things go poorly, he'd need to be able to switch back to enchanter. Later that night, he arrives at a small, rustic building featuring a wooden sign and a sturdy door. Pushing it open, he sees wooden shelves bearing an eclectic assortment of colorful potion bottles. Behind the counter stands an elderly man with a long, thick white beard, wearing a simple green vest and a gray cap. The shopkeeper's wrinkled face instantly lights up with genuine joy upon seeing Ornn, and quickly retrieves a steaming cup of coffee for his guest. The old man greets him enthusiastically, his voice thick with admiration, repeatedly referring to Ornn as a top adventurer and a glorious hero of the realm, and delivers the painful truth. He explicitly informs the shopkeeper that he has been permanently removed from the hero's party, stating that he is no longer an elite adventurer and, therefore, does not deserve the special treatment or the exalted titles the old man insists on using. He looks at the young man with deep paternal affection. He gently but resolutely refuses to alter his opinion. He speaks softly, observing that he has watched Ornn over the years, witnessing firsthand the grueling, unseen hours of relentless hard work and the intense dedication Ornn poured into his craft, effort far surpassing that of any of his peers. The old man places a weathered hand on the table, looking directly into Ornn's eyes. He offers a piece of profound, stabilizing wisdom. He asserts that Ornn's status as a hero was never defined by the title bestowed by a fickle party, and to surround himself only with those who possess the wisdom to truly recognize and value his worth. Ornn sits in quiet contemplation, the old man's sincere words washing over him, slowly dissolving the residual pain and lingering self-doubt inflicted by Oliver and the others. The scene transitions to the bright, crisp light of the following morning. The imposing, grand, wrought iron gates of the night sky. Selma Claudel stands alone just inside the gateway. From the light morning mist rolling off the cobblestone street, Ornn's figure emerges. He walks toward the gates, his posture is relaxed, his head held high, and the heavy burden that previously hunched his shoulders is entirely gone. As he approaches, Selma studies his face. She offers a small, knowing smile, remarking that he appears significantly more lively and vibrant than he did the previous evening. Ornn stops before her, returning the smile with a look of calm, absolute certainty. He subtly acknowledges her observation, hinting that his improved spirit is the direct result of, together, the veteran enchanter and the newly minted jack-of-all-trades turn and walk through the grand gates, stepping forward into a completely new chapter. The episode begins inside the grand and carefully maintained headquarters of the Night Sky Silver Rabbits, an elite adventuring guild known for its discipline and strength. At the center of the chamber sits a massive wooden desk. Seated behind it is Vince Briers, the head of the guild. Vince is a sharp-featured man who's make it clear that he is someone accustomed to making difficult decisions. Vince formally welcomes Orn to the headquarters, acknowledging that he has heard quite a bit about the young man's recent accomplishments. Orn responds with respectful humility, saying that it is a great honor to meet the leader of such a prestigious and highly respected guild. Vince, however, is not one to waste time. He states plainly that he has already been fully briefed on Orn's recent and rather abrupt expulsion from the renowned heroes party. Vince clarifies that he brings this up immediately not as an insult, but simply to clear the air so the two of them can speak openly about the business at hand without any lingering tension. Orn accepts the straightforward approach with a nod, appreciating the honesty, and asks to hear the details regarding the teaching expedition he has been hired to assist with. Vince gestures towards Selma and delegates the explanation to her. Selma begins outlining the demanding schedule for the next 3 days. The goal of the expedition is to guide a massive group of rookie adventurers from the very first floor of the Great Dungeon all the way down to the 51st floor. It is an extremely On the first day, the expedition will descend until they reach the 21st floor, where they will stop and establish a temporary camp. On the second day, they will push deeper, reaching the 36th floor before resting again. Finally, on the third day, the group will descend to their ultimate destination on the 51st floor. As Selma explains the itinerary, the narrative briefly shifts into a flashback showing the moment she originally informed Vince that Orn had been removed from the heroes' party. Upon hearing the news, the guildmaster offered a blunt and analytical assessment. In Vince's opinion, the heroes' party's decision to banish Orn was incredibly foolish. Regardless of whatever internal politics may have caused the split, Vince believes that losing Orn represents a devastating tactical mistake. He confidently predicts that without Orn supporting them, the heroes' party will soon experience a dramatic and unmistakable drop in combat efficiency. Selma strongly agrees with her guildmaster's assessment and expands on the reasoning behind it. From a professional standpoint, she explains that Orn's value to a party cannot be overstated. While he may not specialize in wide area attack spells, his casting speed far surpasses even highly skilled mages like herself. Orn can execute spells nearly 4 times faster than most enchanters, which means he provides real-time magical support that allows a party to move quickly and maintain momentum without needing long setup times. Selma continues praising Orn's abilities. She points out that Orn has personally created several entirely original spells, something very few mages are capable of accomplishing. According to Selma, those traits make him the ideal enchanter for high-level adventuring teams. She smugly remarks that the heroes' party is in for a rude awakening once they realize how much they depended on the invisible support Orn provided. In her mind, the Silver Rabbits now have a perfect opportunity to reclaim their position as the strongest guild in the kingdom. Vince, while intrigued, still finds it somewhat difficult to believe the situation will unfold quite so dramatically. Returning to the present conversation, Orn begins mentally calculating the logistics of the mission. Thinking it through aloud, he realizes that including himself and Selma there will be only 5 veteran escorts overseeing the expedition. These 5 experienced adventurers will be responsible for supervising 10 separate parties of rookie adventurers. Selma confirms that his math is correct. Orn raises an eyebrow and asks why a guild as large and well-resourced as the Silver Rabbits would deploy only 5 escorts for such a large and potentially dangerous operation. Considering the extremely fast pace of descending 50 floors in just 3 days, he points out that standard adventuring doctrine would normally require multiple fully staffed A-rank parties to accompany the group and reduce the risk. Selma explains that the core objective of the expedition is training. The rookie adventurers will rotate through combat engagements and fight the dungeon's monsters themselves in order to gain real battlefield experience. The veteran escorts are not meant to lead the fights directly. Instead, their role is strictly that of emergency fail-safes. Orn quietly realizes that the guild is likely withholding part of the truth. The arrangement feels suspiciously underprepared for such a deep dungeon dive. However, he also understands that he is not a member of their guild and therefore not entitled to every detail of their internal strategy. Even so, he ultimately agrees to participate. Vince explains that once the expedition is completed successfully, Orn will receive an additional 10 gold coins. Orn is momentarily stunned by the amount. The payment alone is more than what many adventurers earn in an entire year. The Silver Rabbits clearly value his skills highly. Recovering from the shock, Orn humbly thanks Vince and vows to perform his duties to the absolute best of his abilities. The scene shifts to the towering natural rock formation that serves as the entrance to the Great Dungeon. Orn arrives at the staging area just outside the entrance to the Great Dungeon. The clearing is already bustling with activity as rookies gather into their assigned groups and veteran adventurers move through the crowd making final preparations. Before long, Sophia and Selma approach him. Sophia immediately catches Orn's attention, though not for the reason he initially expects. She is no longer dressed in her usual caster robes. Instead, she is wearing the same blue and gray uniform issued to the rookie adventurers. He smiles politely and offers a gentle compliment, telling her that the uniform suits her quite well. The words hit Sophia like a surprise spell. Her cheeks flush bright red, and she nervously asks if he truly means it. Selma, however, reacts very differently. The casual compliment instantly puts her on edge. Abruptly asks Orn whether he has a girlfriend. Orn answers honestly that he does not. The questioning continues as Selma then asks where he is currently living. Orn explains that after leaving the heroes' party, he moved out of the mansion they shared and has been staying at an inn for the time being. He casually adds that once he has time, he intends to purchase a house of his own. From the direction the questions are going, she suddenly grows suspicious of her younger sister's intentions. In her mind, she begins worrying that Sophia might be thinking about visiting Orn at his inn. Sophia immediately notices the implication and tries to defend herself, flustered and protesting that her sister is reading too much into things. Before the conversation can spiral any further, Selma smoothly cuts the exchange short. With practiced authority, she tells Sophia to go find the rest of her assigned party and prepare for the expedition. Sophia reluctantly obeys, jogging off to rejoin the other rookies. Once the girls are gone, Selma introduces Orn to the remaining veteran escorts who will be helping supervise the expedition. The first is Anthem, a tall and broad-shouldered man who serves as a frontline defender. His armor is thick and well-worn, clearly built for absorbing punishment. Next is Bernard, another heavily armored defender whose calm demeanor suggests years of experience holding the line in dangerous battles. Finally, there is Kathy, a gentle-looking woman who carries the staff of a healer and radiates a quiet sense of kindness. Together, the five of them form the escort team. The composition is technically well-balanced, though the group itself is surprisingly small given the scale of the expedition. However, while the introductions are happening, his mind is already analyzing the situation. A troubling realization quickly forms. If he had not happened to run into Selma the previous day and agreed to take this job, the escort team would have had no dedicated frontline attacker at all. Orn quietly wonders whether the guild would have forced one of the defenders to adopt a more aggressive role, or perhaps expected Selma herself to fight on the front lines. For a brief moment, the narrative shifts to a flashback conversation between Vince and Selma. In truth, the guild has been struggling more than outsiders realize. Over the past year, their progress through the dungeon has stagnated. Several skilled members have left or retired, leaving their ranks thinner than they would like to admit. If the guild wants to remain competitive, they desperately need to cultivate a new generation of talented adventurers. The expedition is not merely training, it is a gamble on the future. Selma pushes those thoughts aside as she returns to the present moment and focuses on the task at hand. She climbs onto a slightly elevated cluster of rocks so that the gathered rookies can see her clearly. The clearing quiets as she raises her voice, commanding the attention of the large crowd of nervous recruits. Selma announces that today marks the official beginning of their descent to the 51st floor of the Great Dungeon. She openly acknowledges the fear many of them are feeling. Attempting the middle floors this early in their careers is dangerous, and pretending otherwise would be dishonest. With a dramatic gesture, she points toward Orn. She introduces him to the recruits not simply as an escort, but as a legendary adventurer. She proudly declares that Orn has personally navigated the dungeon all the way down to the 94th floor, far deeper than any member of the Night Sky Silver Rabbits has ever reached. A collective gasp ripples through the crowd. The rookies stare at Orn with wide eyes as whispers spread through the gathering. But Selma is not finished. She continues building his reputation, revealing that Orn is also a former member of the legendary Heroes Party. At this point, she practically becomes his personal cheerleader, praising his abilities with such enthusiasm that Selma concludes by assuring the recruits that with someone of Orn's caliber watching over them, the strategy works perfectly. The rookies, who had looked nervous moments earlier, now stand taller, their anxiety replaced with excitement and confidence. A wave of cheers spreads through the clearing. Orn, however, looks deeply uncomfortable. Leaning closer to Selma, he quietly whispers his displeasure. She simply shrugs and brushes the complaint aside, reminding him that she did not actually lie about anything she said. Orn sighs, explaining they never cared much about the title of hero. The only reason he originally agreed to accept the label was because it helped bring more customers to his favorite potion shop back in town. Now, however, Selma has turned that title into an enormous set of expectations that he may not be able to live up to. Selma counters calmly that her responsibility as a leader is to ensure the recruits feel confident enough to focus on training. Using Orn's reputation as a psychological safety net was simply the most efficient way to stabilize their morale. With that settled, Selma moves on to the next matter. She officially assigns Orn to Group 10, instructing him to act as their dedicated shadow escort throughout the expedition. According to her, Group 10 contains the guild's most promising rookies. Orn accepts the assignment, though privately he cannot help questioning the decision. Entrusting the guild's most valuable young talent to an outsider, they only officially hired yesterday, seems like a risky move. Orn quickly notes that a typical adventuring party usually consists of 4 or 5 members in order to cover all the essential combat roles. A 3-person party is significantly more dangerous due to the lack of flexibility. Curious, he asks about it. The blonde boy answers immediately, his tone dripping with confidence. He claims that the 3 of them are far ahead of the other rookies in terms of raw talent. According to him, adding an average recruit to their team would only slow them down. Orn listens quietly, making a mental note. Overconfidence, he knows from experience, is often far more dangerous than any monster waiting inside the dungeon. He asks them to formally introduce themselves and their chosen combat roles. The blonde boy steps forward first, puffing out his chest. He introduces himself as Logan Hayward, the appointed leader of Group 10 and the party's enchanter. With staggering arrogance, the young boy boldly proclaims that he will one day easily surpass Selma Claudel's legendary status. Orn maintains a neutral expression, but internally notes the boy possesses a dangerously inflated ego that could lead to reckless decisions. Next is Caroline. She energetically introduces herself as the party's defender. Orn's sharp eyes immediately scan her attire. He points out a glaring contradiction. She is wearing the standard light cloth uniform of a rookie, without a single piece of metal armor, chainmail, or even a shield. He questions if she plans to equip her defensive gear once they are actually inside the dungeon. Caroline laughs off his concern, confidently explaining that she is a dodge-type defender. She finds the idea of letting a filthy monster actually physically touch her to be disgusting. Instead of absorbing blows, her strategy relies entirely on superior speed and agility to evade attacks while maintaining close proximity to draw the monster's attention, allowing her to simultaneously kill as many beasts as possible. Orn is internally horrified by this tactical choice. He knows from extensive experience that playing a dodge-type defender requires years of grueling combat experience, flawless reflexes, and an absolute mastery of reading enemy movements, skills a raw rookie simply cannot possess. He asks if the guild instructors attempted to dissuade her from this suicidal path. Logan snorts derisively, aggressively, confirming that the teachers constantly warned her, but Caroline stubbornly refuses to listen to anyone. Caroline immediately fires back, pointing out that Logan completely ignores the instructor's advice regarding his enchanting techniques as well. Logan smirks, arrogantly defending his insubordination by claiming he is simply too naturally gifted to need their basic instructions. Orn sighs inwardly, realizing that Selma has handed him a group of highly talented but profoundly problematic children who lack basic discipline. Finally, Sophia steps forward, introducing herself as a caster who will operate from the rear guard as a ranged attacker. Orn finds her introduction to be a breath of fresh air. He braces himself, realizing this teaching expedition is going to be far more exhausting than he initially anticipated. As the large group begins their descent, the boisterous energy of the rookies immediately evaporates, replaced by a tense, heavy silence as the reality of the labyrinth sets in. Despite the tension, Caroline's irrepressible curiosity gets the better of her. While marching, she bluntly interrogates Orn, asking why a member of the universally adored heroes party is slumming it on a basic escort mission with a rival guild. Orn's expression hardens slightly. He attempts to deflect the invasive question, stating flatly that his reasons for leaving are his own private business and have absolutely nothing to do with her. Caroline's mind works quickly, piecing together the timeline and Sophia's earlier vague comments. She turns to Sophia with a triumphant grin, realizing aloud that Orn is the mysterious, incredibly powerful adventurer who saved Sophia's life the previous day. Sophia, flustered, admits the truth, praising Orn's overwhelming strength to her teammates. She notes that his power makes perfect sense given his former status, and she repeats Selma's assurance that they have absolutely nothing to fear with him watching over them. Caroline happily agrees, loudly declaring that having a genuine hero as their bodyguard guarantees a stress-free trip. Orn walks in silence, listening to their chatter. He realizes that Caroline's constant, somewhat annoying prying might actually be a calculated social tactic designed to force Sophia out of her anxious shell and keep the group's morale high in the oppressive dungeon environment. He affords Caroline a small shred of internal respect for her emotional intelligence. Without drawing the attention of the rookies, he subtly weaves complex magical energy. He lays down a series of magical traps. He observes out of the corner of his eye as a pack of vicious, white-furred dungeon wolves attempts to ambush the group from the rear. Before the beasts can even launch their attack, they step onto Orn's hidden runes, instantly impaling the wolves on jagged spikes of magical ice and stone. Orn is highly satisfied with the result. Throughout the day, Orn carefully studies Group 10's combat dynamics. He watches Logan cast his enchanting spells. Despite the boys' abrasive arrogance, Orn is forced to admit that Logan possesses a shocking amount of raw natural talent for magic manipulation. If Logan can learn to properly manage his mana reserves and build physical stamina for protracted engagements, Orn believes the boy genuinely has the potential to eventually secure a place in a high-ranking A-tier party. However, Orn identifies a critical flaw. Logan completely fails to communicate or issue commands during combat. Orn then shifts his analytical gaze to Caroline. Her self-proclaimed dodge-type defensive style is put to the test. Orn is genuinely impressed by her raw physical speed and kinetic agility. However, her aggression is a massive liability. The moment she spots an enemy, she recklessly charges headlong into the fray, breaking formation. Her erratic movements make it impossible for the rest of the party to coordinate around her. Furthermore, she wields only 2 small, lightweight daggers. Finally, he observes Sophia. Unlike her hyper-aggressive teammates, Sophia plays her role perfectly by the book, keeping her distance and casting spells from the safety of the rear. He correctly deduces that her current passivity stems from a lack of deep, trusting bonds with Logan and Caroline, and he anticipates that her true potential will unlock once she feels fully integrated into the team. The grueling day concludes as the expedition reaches the 20th floor. The rookies pull back, and the 5 veteran escorts effortlessly step forward. Selma addresses the exhausted but elated rookies, formally announcing the end of the first day's descent. She instructs everyone to register their progress at the floor's glowing blue teleportation crystal so they can instantly warp back to the surface city for a night of rest. Back on the surface as the sun begins to set, Orn and Selma walk together away from the dungeon entrance. Selma asks for his professional assessment of Group 10. Orn provides a brutally honest critique. He acknowledges their immense individual potential but plainly states that they are currently failing entirely as a cohesive unit, operating as 3 isolated individuals rather than a team. He specifically highlights his grave concerns regarding Caroline's reckless, armorless combat style. Selma chuckles softly, informing him that if he thinks Caroline is difficult to manage now, he should have seen how she operated when she first joined the guild, noting that she has actually improved immensely. Orn genuinely fears what kind of suicidal tactics Caroline must have employed in the past to make her current reckless behavior look like an improvement. The narrative jumps to the following morning. He stands by the window holding the morning edition of the city's newspaper. His eyes are locked onto the front page, his pupils blown wide in a mixture of profound shock and rising horror. The headline blares the news of his personal tragedy to the entire kingdom. The article details, in excruciating public detail, his absolute removal from the heroes party. Further down the page, it enthusiastically introduces his replacement, confidently stating the party is moving forward stronger than ever. The sheer callousness of the timing hits Orn like a physical blow. He had desperately hoped his former friends would possess the basic decency to wait until his current, highly visible teaching expedition was concluded before dragging his name through the mud in the press. Orn's hand violently balls into a fist, crushing the newspaper into a crumpled ball of parchment. The public humiliation is agonizing. His primary concern instantly shifts to the rookies of Group 10. He worries deeply that if any of the recruits read the paper, the fragile respect and trust he had begun to build with them yesterday will instantly evaporate, replacing their awe with pity or outright disdain for a failed hero, and leaves the room to meet his obligations. As he passes beneath the shadow of a large stone archway, a figure steps into his path. It is Luna, a beautiful young woman with long, flowing blue hair and elegant white and blue caster robes. She is a core member of the Heroes Party. Orn stops, his expression instantly guarded. He notes that it has been a while since they last spoke. As he looks at her distressed face, a wave of complex memories washes over him. He remembers the grueling final months in the party, recalling how Oliver and the others had grown increasingly cold, hostile, and dismissive of his contributions. However, he specifically remembers that Luna had never partaken in the cruelty. She had remained consistently kind, treating him with the same respect she always had. Luna had been away from the mansion running an errand when Oliver and the others cornered him and demanded his exit. Luna steps closer, her blue eyes pleading. Her voice trembles slightly as she begs Orn to return to the Heroes Party. She states with absolute conviction that the party is fundamentally broken without him and that they desperately need his unique strength and support to survive the deeper levels of the dungeon. Orn listens, his heart aching slightly. He realizes that her plea is entirely genuine. She truly values him and believes the party made a catastrophic mistake. However, the fresh wound of the newspaper article burns in his mind. He replies coldly, noting that her desire for his return heavily contradicts the reality presented in the morning paper, which explicitly states the party is thrilled with his replacement. Luna looks genuinely confused. She admits that she has been frantically searching for him all morning and hasn't had a single moment to read the daily news. She is completely unaware that Oliver has already made his expulsion and replacement public knowledge, her voice gaining a desperate edge. She promises that if he just agrees to come back to the mansion with her, she will personally fight to persuade the others to reverse their decision. Orn looks at her, the last fragile tethers of his attachment to his old life snapping. He realizes that while Luna's intentions are pure, she is completely naive to the reality of the situation. He flatly refuses her offer. He explains that even if she somehow managed to convince them, returning is conceptually impossible. He reminds her of the harsh truth. Oliver, the undisputed leader of the party, was the one who looked him in the eye and demanded he leave because he viewed Orn as a useless burden. Tears well up in Luna's eyes. She plays her final, most desperate card. She reminds him of a sacred childhood promise they had made years ago, a vow sworn between Orn, Luna, and Oliver that the three of them would stand side by side and be the ones to completely clear the great dungeon together. She asks how he can abandon that dream. He looks at Luna, acknowledging the heavy weight of that past promise, but he gently, firmly counters her emotional plea with the cold reality of the present. The promise was meant for the three of them, and Oliver had definitively chosen to shatter that bond by discarding him. Orn tells her that he is truly sorry, but nothing she says can change his mind. He turns his back on her, his dark coat sweeping around his legs as he begins walking away down the cobblestone street. He admits to himself that, deep down, a part of him desperately wanted things to just stay the way they were, to fulfill the childhood dream with his closest friends. But he forces himself to accept the finality of his situation. There is no going back to the mansion. There is no place for him in the Heroes Party anymore. That chapter of his life, his identity as a hero, completely and permanently ended the moment Oliver demanded he leave. He makes his way toward the towering, natural basalt columns that mark the entrance to the southern Great Dungeon. Orn's gaze is fixed downward, his blue eyes wide and his pupils dilated in an expression of profound shock and rising dread. His internal monologue reveals the source of his distress. An article prominently featured in the daily paper has laid bare the humiliating details of his banishment from the renowned Heroes Party. The publication explicitly states that he was expelled for being too weak, effectively broadcasting his lowest moment to the entire kingdom. Orn agonizes over the timing of the release. He had anticipated that the truth of his exile would eventually surface, but the suddenness of the publication catches him completely off guard. He is acutely aware that the novice adventurers he is tasked with escorting, he braces himself for the inevitable fallout, convinced that no one would willingly place their trust in an explorer who has been publicly branded as a failure. As he approaches the gathering point, he observes the large assembly of young recruits. A low, persistent murmur ripples through the crowd, casting sidelong glances and exchanging hushed whispers. For Logan, this is particularly difficult. As Orn had previously told them, the separation from the Heroes Party was a mutual decision. When Orn arrives, however, the students greet him and attempt to make small talk, asking how his day is going and other ordinary questions in an effort to maintain a sense of normalcy. Orn's sharp hearing picks up fragments of their conversations, confirming his worst fears. They are actively discussing the newspaper article, questioning the truth of his banishment, and wondering whether the man presented to them as a legendary hero is, in fact, an exile. Next, Selma rushes to the dungeon entrance out of breath. She greets Orn with her usual confident demeanor, bowing her head and offering a sincere apology. Orn returns the greeting, his voice measured and carefully controlled. Selma feels compelled to apologize because she was the one who convinced him to take on this role and had enthusiastically praised him to the students, never imagining this story would suddenly break. The two reconcile, and Orn confirms that he still wants to work with her to help guide the students. The other adventurers standing behind her also voice their support. Bernard smiles and says the article changes nothing for him, and the others quickly agree, dismissing the publication as irrelevant. Orn then addresses the elephant in the room. The students greet him again, and he makes it clear that he doesn't mind discussing the article openly. Caroline and Sophia are both fiercely opposed to the claims made in it, loudly denouncing the piece as slander and fabricated trash. Sophia vehemently insists that the words printed in the paper do absolutely nothing to change their high opinion of him. Logan then asks directly if the story is true, and Orn calmly admits that it is. He was kicked out because the others believed he was not strong enough. Logan is stunned to hear him say it so plainly. Sophia, her pink twin tails bobbing as she nods in fervent agreement with Caroline's outrage, quickly jumps in to defend him. She reminds Orn, and everyone listening, of the overwhelming power she personally witnessed when he effortlessly dispatched a horde of monstrous orcs to save her life. Sophia insists that it is fundamentally impossible for a man with that level of combat prowess to be considered weak. Orn stands there for a moment, visibly stunned by their unwavering support. He then openly acknowledges the truth at the heart of the article. He was indeed banished from the Heroes Party, and he confirms that he could no longer meet the increasingly high expectations placed upon him. With quiet humility, he formally discards the grand title of hero. Despite this step down in status, he makes a solemn and unwavering vow to the gathered students, and that he will protect them with his life. Even so, Logan's internal perspective begins to shift. Seeing Orn standing there without the heroic title, Logan feels a pang of guilt for how excited and proud he had been earlier. The expedition officially begins its descent. For the initial phase of the day's journey, covering floors 21 through 31, the veteran escorts adopt a strictly observational role. When a group of goblin-like creatures ambushes them, Orn quickly begins issuing orders. He directs Caroline to take the offensive and instructs Sophia to defend the rear. Before he can give Logan any instructions, however, the boy has already cast a boost spell. Internally, Logan thinks the orders are extremely basic, but he refuses to let that affect his performance. Logan notices that Caroline is about to break free from the enemy pressure, but only because of the boost he provided. As he glances towards Sophia, however, he spots an orc preparing to attack her. His worry spikes instantly. Sophia is still traumatized from her last encounter with orcs, and Logan believes the situation proves they cannot rely on Orn the way they thought they could. He prepares to step in himself, noticing that Orn doesn't appear to be interfering. But before Logan can act, Orn quietly casts agility down on the orc and calmly walks over to speak with Sophia. After a brief pep talk that steadies her nerves, Sophia gathers her courage and manages to take down the orc in a single strike. The group continues onward until they reach the 35th floor. There, the party suddenly halts as they come face to face with a death tarantula. Logan immediately begins panicking internally. In his mind, there's no way their group can handle a monster like that. Orn, however, continues giving orders as if he has faced the creature 1,000 times before. He instructs Caroline to attack. Logan is horrified and instinctively tries to run after her, but Orn stops him immediately, reminding him that his role is to remain in the rear and support her with enhancement magic. Logan is convinced Caroline is about to be killed, but Orn ignores his panic and continues directing the battle with calm precision. He instructs Caroline to use her twin daggers, leap onto the spider, and run along its body to carve a longer, deeper cut. Orn watches her movements carefully and tells her to keep the monster's attention entirely on herself, while dodging continuously. Finally, Logan reluctantly casts a boost spell on Caroline. Her speed and reflexes are undeniably impressive, allowing her to weave through the monster's attacks with acrobatic grace. Orn then turns his attention to Logan, calmly pointing out that Caroline's speed now depends entirely on the boosts he provides. Next, he addresses Sophia, the party's caster. Sophia tightens her grip on her red gemmed staff and casts Air Cutter. The slicing wind manages to sever several of the spider's legs. The team immediately begins celebrating, thinking the battle is already over. Orn abruptly shuts that down, ordering them to stop and telling Logan to cast a strength spell on Caroline. Logan hesitates, confused by the command, but Orn cuts him off sharply and tells him to hurry. Moments later, the reason becomes painfully clear. The death tarantula suddenly spits a stream of sticky fluid, binding Caroline and pulling her toward its fangs. She is dragged closer, on the verge of being killed. Orn immediately orders Caroline to break free, insisting she should have the strength to do it. While she struggles against the binding web, he instructs Sophia to cast a rock spell. Orn then glances toward Logan and quickly realizes the boy can only maintain 3 spells at once. With no other choice, Orn steps in himself, casting a sharpening enchantment on Caroline's blades. The improved edge allows her to slash through the sticky bindings just as Sophia launches a rock arrow, finishing the monster off. The death tarantula collapses to the ground. Caroline immediately celebrates the victory with Sophia, both girls thrilled with their success. Orn, however, simply states that they should return to the surface for the day. Logan, meanwhile, remains deeply unsettled. Orn seems far stronger and far more capable than he lets on. With the 35th floor cleared, Selma formally announces the conclusion of the second day's grueling expedition. Later that evening, the atmosphere is vastly different from the tension of the dungeon. The veteran escorts, Anthem and Bernard, invite Orn to join them for a celebratory dinner at a lively, upscale tavern within the city. The spacious, warmly lit interior glows with amber lantern light, filled with the clinking of heavy wooden mugs and the loud, cheerful chatter of adventurers unwinding after a successful delve. The veterans are in high spirits, happily picking up the tab and insisting that Orn eat as much as he likes. The conversation flows easily, a stark contrast to the cold and dismissive treatment Orn had endured during his final months with the hero's party. The veterans show genuine curiosity about his background, treating him not as a disgraced adventurer, but as an equal and a highly respected peer. Having spent years working with countless adventuring parties, they quickly recognize the newspaper article for what it is, a blatant hit piece. Given everything they've learned about Orn's past contributions to Oliver and the rest of the hero's party, none of them believe Oliver or the others deserve to be called heroes after the way they treated him. Anthem, the towering defender of the group, eventually raises a question about Orn's unique skill set. He points out that Orn initially introduced himself as a frontline attacker, yet the tactical leadership and magical expertise he demonstrated in the dungeon clearly mark him as an elite enchanter. With polite curiosity, Anthem asks Orn to clarify his preferred role and the reasoning behind his unusual dual specialization. Orn pauses, his expression turning thoughtful as he begins to reflect on his past. He explains that his true original passion has always been swordsmanship. He recounts a vivid childhood memory of watching his grandfather, a retired but highly skilled explorer, single-handedly defeat a terrifying monster that had attacked their village using nothing but a blade and superior technique. That awe-inspiring display of martial prowess ignited a fire within Orn and set him firmly on the path toward becoming a swordsman. Bernard leans forward, his brow furrowed in confusion, and asks why Orn would ever abandon that dream to become a support mage. He describes the early days of the hero's party, when they hit a massive, seemingly insurmountable progression wall while venturing into the deeper, more dangerous floors of the dungeon. The monsters had simply become too powerful, and the party's momentum ground to a painful halt. At the time, it was only him and Oliver exploring the dungeon together. Eventually, as they began building their full party, they used Selma as a sort of template for how they wanted the group to function. After analyzing their composition, They realized they were critically lacking a dedicated enchanter. Because Orn possessed a natural versatility, a true jack-of-all-trades aptitude, he volunteered to sacrifice his personal dream of becoming a swordsman, and instead took on the role of support mage to fill the vital gap in their formation. To the veteran adventurers at the table, this sounds like the correct decision. Strategically speaking, the choice clearly worked, since the party ultimately reached the 93rd floor. But Orn quickly and firmly denies that conclusion. He insists it was actually the wrong decision. In his opinion, the party should have worked together as a team to improve everyone's strength rather than forcing one person to abandon their role entirely. To the veterans, his statement sounds almost irrational, and they exchange puzzled looks, unable to grasp the deeper meaning behind what he's saying. Orn notices their confusion and simply smiles, telling them to ignore him. He doesn't want to sound like he's bad-mouthing his former party, even though that's how it might come across. Deep down, however, Orn quietly shares the same thoughts Selma and Vince once hinted at. The chances of Oliver's team reaching the 94th floor, or going even deeper, are effectively zero. Still curious, the veterans ask Orn what he believes makes a truly great swordsman. Orn answers simply, a swordsman should be a jack of all trades. The two veterans immediately express disbelief. Orn then elaborates, explaining that the swordsman is the one who carries the party. To fulfill that role, a true swordsman must be capable of handling anything, fighting, adapting, surviving, without relying entirely on others. In his mind, a swordsman should be strong enough to push toward the deepest floors of the dungeon even on their own. The scene then transitions away from the loud, lively tavern to the quiet, steamy interior of a luxurious public bathhouse. Caroline brings up the fact that tomorrow will be the final day of the expedition. After that, they probably won't see Orn again. Sophia grows quiet for a moment. Internally, she realizes she doesn't want him to leave. Caroline quickly picks up on her feelings and begins teasing her, fully aware that Sophia wants Orn to stay. Laughing, she jokingly suggests that Sophia should beg him to remain with them the same way she sometimes begs favors from her older sister. Sophia shakes her head, doubting that something like that would work. Orn is clearly a busy adventurer with his own responsibilities. Both girls agree that they would love to keep him around as someone affiliated with the Night Sky Silver Rabbits Guild. The next day, Oliver and the heroes' party will be entering the dungeon with their newest member. Luna, however, looks deeply uneasy, as if she already senses that something terrible is about to happen. Next begins the final day of the adventure's summer camp of the Night Silver Rabbits. Orn believes he won't be seeing this sight anymore. The trio greets him with bright, cheerful energy. They express their mutual disbelief and excitement that the final day of their current dungeon expedition has finally arrived. Orn, maintaining his characteristic pragmatism, focuses on ensuring that everyone returns to the surface safely. However, the young adventurers are eager to celebrate their impending success. One of the girls playfully suggests that if they manage to pull off the final leg of their mission without a hitch, Orn should bestow upon them a significant reward for a job well done. Orn appears mildly caught off guard by the request, asking what kind of reward they might have in mind. Caroline turns to her teammate, a young woman named Sophia, prompting her to speak. In a brief flashback, it's revealed that she desperately wants to convince Orn to remain with the Night Silver Rabbits on a permanent basis. But in reality, she's unable to say it. Caroline nudges her again and Orn waits patiently, curious to hear her answer. But before Sophia can overcome her shyness, her older sister Selma calls Orn over, needing his help. As Orn moves, he overhears a conversation between two student adventurers. They are excitedly discussing the new heroes' party, led by Oliver. The rumor is that they intend to dive into the deepest parts of the dungeon that very day. One adventurer expresses shock, asking if they are starting as deep as floor 94. The other corrects him, saying they will begin at floor 92 to gauge their synergy as a new unit before descending further. Orn stops in his tracks, his brow furrowing as he processes this information. He knows the dangers of those lower levels intimately. He thinks to himself that if they truly wanted to test their coordination, they should have started on much higher, safer floors, rather than diving into the treacherous depths with a new enchanter. However, he quickly dismisses the thought, reminding himself that their success or failure is no longer his responsibility. The scene shifts to the dark, oppressive atmosphere of floor 92. Oliver's new party stands assembled. Oliver, radiating a misplaced sense of confidence, declares that this is the dawn of the new heroes' party. He makes a disparaging remark about the loser who used to hold them back, Orn, and introduces Philly Carpenter as their new comrade. Oliver states their goal clearly, to conquer the inner southern dungeon. Philly bows politely, thanking them for allowing her to join. Derek and Henal quickly chime in with their own insults, expressing relief that they finally have a proper enchanter who can provide real buffs. They boast that anything is better than having a jack of all trades dragging them down. Philly, feeling the pressure, offers a humble promise not to disappoint them. Oliver glances over at Luna, who remains silent, carefully observing the group's growing arrogance. Internally, Oliver thinks that once Luna sees the difference, she'll have no choice but to admit that this was the right decision. More than anything, he wants to impress her. Philly stands at a welcoming party in the hero's residence. She introduces herself, and Oliver proudly explains that Philly reached the 100th floor of the southern dungeon on her own, proving she's the real deal as an enchanter. The celebration is lively, filled with extravagant food and decorations. As Philly admires the house and comments on the quality of the food, Derek and Anelli begin speaking openly. They criticize Orn, calling him weak and accusing him of mismanaging their finances. They boast that now, with control of their earnings restored, they can finally live the way they deserve. Oliver raises a hand, cutting them off slightly. That's enough. Today's about celebrating Philly joining us. The festivities are interrupted when Luna bursts through the doors, her face pale with worry. She informs the group of a strange rumor she just heard, but stops when she realizes they are in the middle of a party. Oliver urges her to speak, and she reveals the news that Orn has joined the Night Sky Silver Rabbits. The reaction is immediate and polarized. Oliver is stunned. Derek is outraged, and Anelli can't believe that Orn would find a new group so so quickly. It's only been 3 days, and Derek sneers that the punk still thinks he deserves to be in an S-rank party. Luna is confused by their hostility and asks for clarification on what happened while she was away. Annalie informs her that Oren left the party 3 days ago. Luna is devastated, her large blue eyes welling as she realizes that Oren has finally given up on them. Oliver nods as if he wasn't the one to throw him out. Derek doesn't like how she said it, as if they were the weak ones. They were happy to kick that jack of all trades out. This changes her expression, being emotionless, asking Oliver if that is what really happened. Oliver said that it is, and tries to move forward by introducing the new member, who finds this all awkward and says hello. Luna ignores her to have the conversation with Oliver on how Oren was strong and the main reason they got this far. Derek becomes aggressive, demanding Luna be more respectful to their new comrade, but Oliver holds him back. He tells Luna that Oren simply wasn't strong enough to keep up with them anymore. Luna counters that it should be obvious that Oren was the true key to the party's strength, and that without him, they will be unable to progress any further. Annalie laughs off the suggestion, mocking the idea that a jack of all trades could be special. She declares it's too late for complaints, and that nothing will change it as they already burned that bridge. Luna bites her lip hard to accept this. Oliver, wanting to move on, says they need to work and practice with Philly, saying in 2 days they'll have their first test. His goal is to start on floor 92. Again, Luna is against the idea, as she doesn't want to end up as a corpse, but again, the others don't see her point of view. To Luna, it's obvious you start and build up trust on a lower floor and come up together. Derek and Annalie argue they've already cleared it before, and Luna says they barely won last time there was a black dragon, but again, the two think it's because they had Orn, a weak loser. They get into an argument, and Oliver says silence, he won't hear any more of it, and Luna stutters and shuts up. Not gonna lie, it's crazy he's talking to her like this. Back in the present, on floor 92, the party encounters a massive, woolly, mammoth-like creature with glowing blue eyes and ivory tusks that crackle with magical energy. Oliver charges forward with his sword. He unleashes a series of strikes, but the creature barely flinches. He is shocked to find that he can't seem to hurt it. Oliver begins to yell at Philly for more support magic, but Philly says she's doing all she can. Oliver wonders why his body is so heavy. Derek moves in to block a counterattack with his shield, but the impact sends him reeling back, his feet skidding across the stone floor. He is baffled, remembering how he used to block such attacks with ease. Annalie attempts to cast a fireball, her incantation swift, but the resulting explosion is small and ineffective, barely singeing the creature's fur. She becomes frustrated, claiming she is casting her spells exactly as she always does. They feel significantly weaker. Oliver shouts at Philly, demanding to know why their buffs are wearing off so quickly. Philly apologizes and admits she hasn't yet figured out the party's individual fighting styles. The battle continues to deteriorate. The mammoth-like beast unleashes a blast of energy that knocks Derek off his feet and sends Annalie scurrying for cover as she sees her life flash. Oliver, he realizes that at this rate, they won't be able to sustain the fight. He watches Derek and Annalie struggle, their coordination falling apart without the invisible glue that Oren used to provide. Oliver yells at Philly to recast her support magic, her hands glowing with green circles of light, but the effect is negligible. Philly desperately tries to comply. Oliver looks down at his sword, the ornate weapon feeling like a foreign object in his hands. He can't draw out its full power today. In theory, Philly's magic should be increasing his physical abilities, but he feels weaker than ever. That's when he yells at Luna, and Luna asks if he finally understood now. Oliver demands her to tell him as their comrades, and she finds it funny how he remembered that now, but before she can explain, her eyes go wide. Suddenly, a much larger, more terrifying presence emerges from the sky. It is a black dragon. Oliver is paralyzed with fear, unable to understand why a boss-level creature would leave its designated area and appear here. The dragon lets out a deafening roar that echoes through the cavern, its sheer power vibrating in the adventurers' chests. Luna screams that they need to leave immediately, but Derek said they beat it once, so they can do it again, and Annalie agrees. Oliver and Derek, driven by a mixture of pride and desperation, argue that they can beat it just like they did before. Luna tries to tell them there is no way they can win, but they refuse to listen. Derek tries to block an attack, but ends up being sent backwards by a fireball. Luna runs to heal him. Oliver commands Philly to buff him one more time, but then he sees it. Philly is frozen, staring up at the dragon in a trance of pure terror. Oliver realizes with a sinking heart that while she may be a powerful enchanter on paper, she lacks the mental fortitude required for high-level combat. Annalie tries to use her fire javelin and it fails, and she whispers to herself, "That's impossible." The dragon charges and attacks and fires at Annalie. She tries to hide behind a boulder, but the rock and her are blown away. Luna has to yell at Oliver to get a grip. They need to all run now. It takes a while, but he comes back to Earth. Then he decides he will try and hold it off to give them all time to leave. So after a buff from Philly, he tries to perform a magical conversion. But again, Luna points out he needs to build up more magic. And again, he ignores her and uses his Divine Flash, and it cancels out the dragon's attack. But again, this isn't good enough for Oliver, as he expected this to be an anime fight where he one-shots the dragon. He looks to Luna, asking for help on what to do. And again, she tells him he's supposed to be the leader. Why is he looking to her? Luna realizes they have only one option left. She pulls a glowing crystalline vial from her belt, a fickle gate, an emergency teleportation item. She explains that it will open a portal to a random boss area between the upper and lower floors, which is dangerous, but far better than facing certain death here. Oliver, his pride finally broken, agrees. Luna smashes the vial against the ground, and a swirling purple-black portal erupts into existence. As the dragon prepares another breath attack, the dragon, sensing its prey escaping, lunges forward and is partially sucked into the gate along with them. They are safe for the moment. Oliver notes that the dragon followed them in, and Derek doesn't care, as at least they are safe. And Luna says that's the worst possible thing, as now that dragon is on the lower floor with lower rank adventurers who will likely die. Luna wants to bring Orn back, but they refuse to apologize and have him come back here. Next, Luna spends the time lecturing the party on why they need Ornn, who don't want to hear it. She explains basic support and enchanter roles, and how for this party, the reason Philly isn't doing so well is because all three of them have a lot of built-in magic resistance, so it makes it harder for spells to work on them. The reason Ornn was able to make their attacks stronger is because Ornn made his own unique spells. And that's when they realize how impressive Ornn was, even if he wasn't as talented as Philly as an enchanter. As they run back to the lower floors, Oliver won't let the point go, as Philly is more talented, but Luna tells him that in most cases, Oliver is correct. But Ornn made a spell that buffed people 50 times what they normally do, and that throws Philly off as that's impossible. Still, Philly says that shouldn't be possible, as even Selma could only increase a person by 10 times what they normally were. Luna says she might be off a little, but she's close, as both Oliver's Divine Flash and Annalie's attack magic got the most boost from it. But she continues saying the power went to his head, and he got so overconfident, he got impatient and stopped gathering as much magical power when charging. If he didn't have this bad habit, he'd be at least able to knock the dragon out the air. But then she turns her attention to Anneli, as the woman has gotten so lazy, she no longer can probably use high-rank spells anymore, as she continues to settle for quick, mid-range spells that don't take as much time, but now Anneli's mana pool is low because she's out or practicing. Ornn even made a defense ability so they would feel light after his spells and could attack continuously. It ends with the party slowly running out the dungeon exits. As they do so, the other adventurers continue to look at them with awe and wonder, whispering how great they are and how strong they are with their new enchanter. They move with none of the arrogance they possessed at the start of the day. The weight of their failure and the knowledge of the danger they have unleashed on the rest of the dungeon hangs heavy over them.